Good morning. I'd like to call to order County Council's agenda meeting for March 16th, 2021. Will all please rise? We'll pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As is our want, we will accept public comment both at the beginning and the end of the meeting on our Wednesday evening meetings. On Tuesday, we only accept them at the end of the meeting. Public comment can be phoned in to 610-891-4931, or one can send an email to publiccomment@co.delaware.pa.us. Please include your name and address, and your comment will be read into the record. The next agenda item calls for the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 4th, 2021. Any questions or comments from council on this agenda item? All right, tomorrow evening, and I don't think we're going to do it today, but tomorrow evening we will, as we have been doing regularly, have a COVID vaccination update from Ms. Holt and perhaps Dr. O. So we'll look forward to hearing from that tomorrow night. I mean, it's obviously an ever-changing event, but things seem to be going in a better direction now than they had been a few weeks ago. The next agenda item will call for a resolution recognizing March as Intellectual and Development Disabilities Awareness Month, and we will look to Ms. Ruther tomorrow evening to present that. The next item, tomorrow night, we will read a resolution recognizing the Delaware County Women's Commission 2020-2021 Women's History Month winners, and I believe Councilwoman Schaefer is going to read that. The next agenda item calls for the approval to accept a grant from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency in the amount of $272,951 for a term of January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022 for Senior Victim Services Victim Witness RAZA grant. And I believe we have our district attorney, Mr. Stolzheimer, here to present that. Good evening or morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is one of the main funding sources for the Office of Senior Victim Services. You gave us approval some weeks ago to make the application, and we have now gotten successfully granted the money again. So we would ask for you at this point to accept the funds.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? All right, thank you, Mr. Stolzheimer.
Thank you, sir. I think I have the next one too.
Oh, you're on the next one too. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Well, I still thank you. Agenda item number 9 calls for the approval to accept a grant in the amount of $77,000 for the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas program for the term January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022. And as we just noted, Mr. Stolzheimer is still with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is federal dollars that come to us to fund the county's drug task force, which is made up of some members of our county detective investigative bureau and a lot of local municipal police officers. They do great work. These funds allow them to continue that work. I'm actually a little disappointed in the amount. I thought we were going to get more money this year. This is about the same amount we got last year. So we're going to continue to work through HIDA sources to figure out how we can draw down more money to the great work our team is doing here in Delaware County. But I would ask you to accept this grant. It is all federal funds that comes in and allows us to do things without using county monies.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council?
Does this cover salaries or equipment or both, or?
A lot of salaries is salary in overtime, police overtime, but also you're exactly right, Elaine. We also buy a lot of equipment with this, and we also use it to do certain things like confidential informants. We use them to do undercover buys, and so that money we use to actually buy drugs to make during investigations is actually funded in part out of these funds. And HIDA is it's a regional organization set up by the feds to have everybody work closely together on big drug investigations. And so the funds come down through HIDA. We're board members of HIDA, but it's really regionally based. And there's a complex funding formula that I'm not sure we're well aware of enough to be able to draw down the full funding I think we deserve. Long answer to a short question. I'm sorry.
Well, I look forward to next year you coming and getting approval for a bigger grant.
I like that idea too. Thank you.
Anything further on agenda item number 9? All right, hearing nothing further, we'll see you tomorrow evening, Mr. Stolzheimer. Turning to agenda item number 10, this calls for an approval to amend the 2021 budget of the Register of Wills Office by $85,000 to provide for 4 additional personnel per the request of the Register of Wills. The requested positions are necessary to meet ongoing work requirements and to meet surge requirements related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have Ms. Ezelberry here to present this, and I think Mr. Lazarus is also going to speak on this. We'll turn to Ms. Ezelberry first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you. I want to say at the onset that the statistics that I'm going to talk about are more than just statistics. These are people that we've lost in our community. These are family members and human beings. And so to the extent that I talk about some of the changes that have happened in the last year and sound statistical in doing so, it is in no way a diminishment of the real pain that has happened in our community. Looking at statistics from the Chester County Coroner's Office, the death rate in our region is up 70% over the previous 10-year average. I would note that because COVID hit approximately 1 year ago today, it's possible that the actual number of increase in the death rate in our area is actually in fact much higher, because that number would seem not to capture any increase in the first quarter. In the Register of Wills Office, this translates into an increase in work in numerous ways, and I'll just list a few of them here. When there's a 70% increase in deaths, there's a corresponding increase in the number of estates that need to be probated, which in turn triggers approximately 2 years of reporting requirements. All of those are also handled by my office. My office is also the agent for the processing of inheritance tax payments. We receive increased workloads there. Because all end-of-life care petitions are filed with the Orphans Court, we receive an uptick in efforts there. We've also observed an uptick in work due to individuals moving up weddings because a relative was dying. Some constituents that I've spoken to have wanted to move up their weddings so a person who was dying from the other side of an iPad could attend the wedding. And my staff has done anything and everything it needed to do to make sure that all of those happened. We've also had weddings moved up because people have lost jobs and they feared that their partner would lose health benefits. And this is just really a snapshot of what's happened. With respect to this incredibly modest adjustment to the budget, I would note that as a revenue generating office in Register of Wills, that the increased revenues in our office as a result of these increased services more than offset this very modest adjustment. And I would further note that many improvements I've made to existing processes in terms of making them more efficient and automating them have resulted in additional cost savings that further offset this modest adjustment. One small example of that would be that by moving all payments to credit card payments in advance as opposed to accepting checks, we no longer have an issue of bounced checks that we never received monies for. My quick estimate, since learning I'd be presenting here today, midday on Friday, is I believe that those savings alone from improved processes is something close to $69,903.88. So for your consideration with respect to the toll that this has taken in our community, and in addition to the expected uptick in services relating to Real ID, this is the modest proposal at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lazarus. Did you care to speak further on that?
We all support the rebudgeting. Ms. Ezelberry's taken over the Register of Wills office during a time of great turbulence and uncertainty. And she aspires not only to provide better service to the community, but also to continue to transform the office to become a thought and practice leader for the area. So two of the positions are returned to the budget from last year, which she has since found out that she needs to maintain parity with two organizations. The other two, as she discussed, short term are necessary to deal with the increased workload. Long term, as she looks at her staffing levels to improve the level of service and as said, become a leader in the area, we'll work together on the upcoming budget year. So we all support the change to her budget so that she can provide exceptional service to the community during stressful times.
Thank you, Mr. Lazarus, and thank you, Ms. Eselberry. Any questions or comments from council?
I would just say thank you to you for your memo that you gave us in preparation of this meeting. It was really well done and convincing, and really set out the issues convincingly. So I appreciate that. And I also want to say, your office has been under enormous strain for the last year and sort of under the radar. And I want you and your office, your employees, staffers to know that we are incredibly grateful for everyone in that office going above and beyond. And hopefully that this action, giving the increased staffing, will ease the pressure that's been on this office for the last year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, thank you, Ms. Eselberry. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 11. This calls for the approval to purchase an additional 100 Business Suite Limited professional user licenses from SAP Public Services, Inc. at the cost of $45,000 and an annual support fee of $9,900. And I believe we have Mr. Bellotta here to present this. Good morning, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're requesting approval to purchase 100 SAP licenses. We've evaluated current and future needs of different departments that are expanding, as well as the county's need to stay in compliance with our SAP license agreement. I've attached a document that outlines some of the needs that we've identified, and the funds will come from the IT licensing budget.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bellotta?
No, I would just like to make one comment, which is I'm really glad that we are getting additional licenses. I think in my, 14 and a half months on council so far, I have really been concerned that there ought to be a greater depth of access to SAP, because it is not just a financial planning tool and the general ledger of the county, and it's an integral part of operations in Delaware County. And so I think there are a lot of people who, while they may not have, they may not have permissions to enter things outside of their area of expertise, and that's totally, I think, under the control of the controller, who has statutory and authority under the charter to manage that. But there are a lot of people who need the information that's in SAP, and we've had limited access. I would follow this up, and this has been a refrain really since I got on council, and in my short, highly forgettable stint as the chief administrative officer of the county, and something I've mentioned to Mr. Lazarus and Mr. Kane and Mr. Bellotta, and certainly Ms. Phillips and I have talked about it. In addition to the licenses, we need training, and we really need to institute an internal training program, not just for the people who are managers of departments, and not just for the people who are designated as the departmental SAP guru, but for the backups and for the people who need to be there. Because we've had, and this predates us being on council, because I know this happened in various departments that I've spoken to and dealt with while I was outside of council. We've had lapses where, because the person with the SAP appointment wasn't around, a department didn't have somebody else to do it and didn't get anybody else to do it. And, that's not the fault of the system. That's the fault of management for not making sure that we have necessary redundancy. And the only way we can address that is by having additional access which this item on our agenda provides for, and the training to go with it, so that people know how to use the system and know what role it's playing in their operational, in their operations and the county's operations. So thank you.
So if I may add, we all agree training is essential. The Chief Financial Officer, Ms. McComas, and Ms. Dupe Oke in her office have started training. It's specifically oriented towards the 2022 budget preparation, but it is a large step forward towards getting to the level of training that Ms. Ruther has talked
I would just add that we currently have a proposal in hand for that additional training, which we're evaluating. It's rather expensive, and so we need to find multiple bids for that at this point. So we've only gotten one bid in for that training.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ideally, when a tool is as important as SAP is to Delaware County right now, we would find a way to make this part of our ongoing training. And I know that, the truth of the matter is, I think we kind of campaigned on the fact that we thought there were just some operational entropy had set in over the years in Delaware County. And I'm going back like decades, not a year or two. And I think the training resources and the commitment to growing our workforce growing our workforce not in size, but in skills, is an area that's long needed attention. So my hope is that while this initial effort to get people up to speed may require an outside trainer, that we will be building the capacity inside over time to be able to do this.
Just not to beat a dead horse, but just to say that the training does go on constantly, from on payroll and on doing functions on financial transactions. There are instructions for everyone, and the people that have been using it in the departments will find that they are generally experts. The redundancy here will be really helpful because we've had 300 licenses and we've used almost every single one. We've identified only 10 or 12 that were from people that retired or people that don't log on. So there really wasn't any ability to add people in departments. So I'm looking forward to getting that, get a level of redundancy to departments and to the new areas. But any department that needs help knows that they can call our department for assistance. And the people that use it, I think, will find, they're used to using it. And just one last thing, when the pandemic hit, we were able to quickly identify everyone that had the license and used it, and made sure that even though they were remote, they were able to make the approvals and do the entries. So we really didn't miss a beat on that, but this will give a lot more depth to the county. And I definitely support the training for all new people that need it. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on agenda item number 11? We'll move on then to agenda item number 12, which calls for the approval to advertise for requests for proposals to provide failover internet service to Delaware County. And Mr. Blada is going to present this one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, currently the government building, the court system, as well as libraries, fair acres, and human services receive their internet access through the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. This internet service provides a 1 gigabit connection, which is adequate. However, over the last 12 months, we've had several outages of service, resulting in loss of connectivity for basic services to employees, such as email, virtual meetings, VPN, and other critical services connecting us to the state. So as we look forward to securing our environment by moving key applications to the cloud, the first step is to ensure that the basic infrastructure is in place to support that it's reliable, and we have a failover. And key new technologies such as voice over IP to replace our aged phone systems rely heavily on that resilient connection. So our request from County Council is to advertise for an RFP for a backup internet connection supporting the different locations I've outlined.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bellata?
I just have a practical question. When I was reading this, I was trying to picture how it works. Is this sort of like having a generator so that like when your internet fails, it will immediately kick in, or is it something you have to activate if there's a major failure?
So the RFP is going to have two pieces to it. One will be an automatic failover, one will be a manual failover. So we'll evaluate both proposals. The issue with the automated failover is sometimes when the connection's not stable, it's hard to know that it's failing. So I want to evaluate both pieces, but it is very similar to a generator that would kick in so that virtual meetings and other services can continue to be provided.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Bellata? All right, thank you very much, sir. See you tomorrow night.
Yep, thank you.
Agenda item number 13 calls for approval of agreements, contracts, and amendments with the human services providers of services as per the attached list. And Ms. Garrison is with us this morning. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I would like to go a little bit out of order on my list because one of the acceptance of a grant involves a district attorney. So my first request is to accept the grant for the community mobilization projects for harm reduction services through the Regional Overdose Prevention Coalition and Vital Strategies. This is for the Narcan distribution. Council did approve for myself and the district attorney's office to submit a grant on behalf of the Substance Abuse and Recovery Task Force to distribute Narcan throughout the county. And we're looking at different ways in conjunction with EMS, firefighters, and so forth to find a more, I guess, so it doesn't involve law enforcement as much way to distribute the Narcan to the community. So with that, I turn it over to Mr. Stolzheimer for additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sandy, for all the great work you're doing. Sandy and I are co-chairs of the Substance Abuse and Recovery Task Force. The number one goal of this task force is to get Narcan widely distributed throughout the business community and every residential home we can possibly get it into. This is nothing but a life-saving drug. It has no bad effect on anybody. The only thing it can do is save your life if you happen to be having an opioid overdose. And there are a number of cases we've had here in Delaware County that we're prosecuting right now of people who would still be alive if businesses had Narcan in them. So our number one goal, and I think Councilman Madden shares this as well, is to work with our community groups, our first responders, everybody we can, our legislators, county council, everyone, to set up events or ways of getting this life-saving drug into as many people at homes as we possibly can. And this grant that Sandy's people have worked so hard on is going to help us do that. So I want to thank her. Also want to take a moment to thank Tim Boyce because his shop has already helped us tremendously by taking over the Narcan we currently have and getting it moved over to the Emergency Services Center. As Sandy alluded to, we're trying to break the stigma of people having to go to law enforcement to get Narcan. And one way to do that is use the firefighters, use emergency services, use community groups to do that. And I know Mr. Madden, I think, shares that view as well because he is a member of the task force.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank again our district attorney for hitting the reset button on a task force that obviously has a life critical objective to it and bringing in Ms. Garrison to co-chair the task force. And you know, I think this is, you know, and there's a lot we can do better in our combating of this epidemic. But the most immediate element to saving lives is getting Narcan in the hands of people throughout the community and ensuring that we do everything we can to break the stigma of every person, every business that ought to have Narcan in their pockets, that they have that. So I really appreciate the work that's being done here to further that effort.
Thank you. Any further comments on this part of agenda item number 13? All right, Ms. Garrison?
Thank you. The next request is to accept the $2.1 million dollars in monies for the reinvestment plan that was submitted for the county for the transitional housing program. This comes to the Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. Additionally, I'd asked to extend our current agreement with GEO recovery because they are the ones that are the provider for the transitional housing program. And this takes in individuals that are in the prison that are transitioning to the community and provides them with an intermediary step between prison and the community. And it has a focus on individuals with mental health concerns. The reinvestment funds will run through the end of calendar year 2025. And they will fund 9 individuals in this program. The program is an 18-bed facility. The other 9 are funded through additional funds that comes from Human Services for mental health services. I'd also request for permission to submit the draft treatment needs assessment plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol. And this is a plan we need to submit for our 5-year goals and concerns we have with substance abuse in the county and how we're going to address those concerns. And then I'd also finally I'd ask Senator to agree with Malvern Treatment Centers for withdrawal management and non-hospital residential treatment at both of their sites. The one is in Malvern, the other one is in Willow Grove. Both sites, in addition to doing trauma-informed care and addressing co-occurring disorders, both do offer medication-assisted treatment. And finally, I'd ask to amend our current agreement with KUEHG Corp. With the Child Subsidy Daycare Program to add one of their sites.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Ms. Garrison?
Can you just clarify the reentry program that this is funding that will go into 2025, and it's through the partnership that we currently have with GEO.
Yes.
Assuming there's a transition and GEO is no longer running those services and the county is that funding or a funding agreement or grant agreement agile to switch over who is the partner?
I'm not honestly sure since this is a contracted services through Human Services. So my understanding has been, and I can verify this, that regardless of what happens with the prison, this is a separate contract for their mental health reentry program. We can put it out for bid if that's what council would like to do, but I don't necessarily know if the prison changing to come back within the county, if that would directly impact this automatically. But I can look into that for tomorrow night.
Okay, thanks.
And Councilwoman Schaefer, you mentioned 2025. The way I read this schedule, the requested approval is for an amendment through 2022.
I believe it should be through 2025 since that's when the funds are available for. But I will confirm that as well.
Well, even if it is 2022,
so
we would anticipate the transition happening before the end of 2022. So I just want to, I'm just curious to see how that's, if GEO is a contracting partner there, how we're going to need some flexibility in that grant.
Yeah, Elaine, I'm almost positive that it's a totally separate contract. I'm going to get into it.
Okay.
This is with, I'm sorry, is this with GEO Cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just, I recall voting on that separately.
Okay.
We never voted on the prison contract, and we did on this one. So I'm certain that's it's different.
Okay.
All right. Anything further for Ms. Garrison on agenda item number 13? All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 14, which calls for the adoption of the Office of Human Services Racial Equity Statement. And Ms. Garrison is here to present that.
Yes, as council's aware, in August of last year, a contract was approved with Multicultural Community Family Services to do the Unpacking Systemic Racism project within Human Services. This project started with the administrative team, and we've been working in conjunction with the provider twice a week since August. And I don't think I can adequately explain everything that's going on in those meetings. It was very intense. It was very informative. I think as a team, we've transitioned. This is the next step to move the racial equity project through all of Human Services, not just the administrative team. I want to thank council and Howard for their support in this endeavor as well. So with this request, I'd ask that we adopt the racial equity statement for Human Services, and with council's permission tomorrow night, I would also like Ms. Camara of MCFS to be present as well to talk a little bit about the work.
I think this is a really great step, especially on the part of Human Services. I mean, I think the data that's out there has shown that I think despite, good intentions and obviously a real desire to help, that there are racial disparities in how services are provided and outcomes for individuals and families, and understanding the root cause of that it's an ongoing process, because I don't think it is certainly not and who's to say what the reasons are in any given case, but understanding what every individual worker at Human Services brings to their clients, and their understanding is so crucial. And I applaud you and your leadership team and your staff, especially those who really approach this with an open heart and an open mind. And I think it is important that when we do adopt this policy for DHS, that you do have somebody here to explain the work, because I know one of the questions was, well, why don't we just adopt something like this for all of the county? But I don't think it makes any sense to adopt this for the whole county without because the whole county has to go through the same kind of process that you and your staff have gone through to get to this point. And I think it's a goal. It's something we should put out there, but you are clearly a crucial path for our most vulnerable residents here in Delaware County. And I thank you for your leadership in this.
I wanted to also thank you for your leadership in this. I mean, Human Services has been out front on this, and, I've been in some of the sessions and they are really intense, and you've been doing this twice a week, the entire administration through Human Services, twice a week for the last 9 months. So thank you for that. And thank you for pushing us forward.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Ms. Garrison on agenda item number 14? All right, we'll see you tomorrow night, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 15 calls for the approval of resolution 2021-2, establishing a commercial property assessed clean energy program for the entire county, approving the Sustainable Energy Fund as the administrator of the program, and delegating certain authority to the county executive director and chief sustainability office. And we have a dream team presenting this. We have Ms. Goodrich-Cairns, we have Ms. Locke, we have Mr. Lichtenstein, and we have Ms. Edinger here to present this. So I will let you guys fight amongst yourselves as to who wants to speak first.
I'd like to start. So my name is Francine Locke, and this is a resolution, as you said, establishing the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program for the County of Delaware. We're very proud to present this resolution. It's an innovative first step in creating our sustainability plan. The PACE program is a very innovative financial tool for commercial property owners to obtain low cost, low interest, long-term loans for clean energy and clean water projects that are repaid as property tax to benefit the community. Owners of existing or new properties zoned commercial, industrial, and or agricultural are eligible for CPACE financing. CPACE can provide up to 100% funding of total project costs by placing a special voluntary assessment on the property that repays the costs of the upgrades. Once a county passes a resolution, as we're requesting today, the program guidelines are finalized and approved by the county. Property owners may then develop a clean energy project and secure a capital provider to finance the project. The loan payment is added to the property tax bill and collected as an assessment by the county. The main responsibility of the county is to collect CPACE assessments through the existing property tax collection process and to remit payment back to the program administrator, who will remit the payment to the various capital providers. SCF is here today, represented by Holly Edinger. She is from the nonprofit that has openly offered to act as a program administrator for any local unit of government in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Holly is here today to answer any questions you may have. SCF provides any county or municipality opting into a uniform turnkey CPACE program administration platform that can be adopted at no cost to the county. The program administrator reviews and certifies projects that are eligible for CPACE financing. And Pennsylvania has an open market, meaning lenders can be banks, equity investors, or others. These capital providers must register with SEF if they are funding a project in a county where SEF is administrating the program, such as Delaware County now. Many clean energy projects may be financed through this, including whole building insulation, geothermal heating, combined heat and power, smart building systems, heat recovery systems, chillers, boilers, or furnaces. And the benefits are many: community, economic, and environmental, more resilient buildings, improved energy efficiencies, and property value may increase. So that's just a little overview. I wasn't sure how many of you were familiar with CPACE, so I wanted to share some details. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Before we turn to council for questions, anything to add, Ms. Goodrich-Cairns or Mr. Lichtenstein or Ms. Ettinger?
No, sir.
All right, any questions or comments from council?
Well, I'll start. I'm thrilled that we are moving forward with this program. I am really excited to be moving forward with Sustainable Energy Fund. I understand, are you the administrator also for Montgomery County? Yes, and I understand you just completed the first really big transaction there. Oh, we can't hear you. Unfortunately, it does look like you're off mute, but no audio.
I can answer that. Montgomery County has the largest CPACE project to date in the state of Pennsylvania, which we are looking to surpass, of $10 million currently underway. SEF is actually the CPACE provider in every county where a CPACE program has been adopted in the state of Pennsylvania, with the exception of Philadelphia. Of course, they are using Philadelphia Energy Authority. Philadelphia Energy Authority does not have any desire to administer CPACE as a third-party administrator other than in Philadelphia.
Thank you. And I do have one other kind of practical, logistical question. The capital providers, or whoever is providing financing, is there sort of a go-to list that SEF it uses, or is that for every project? Is it like bidding process? Like how does that? How is the financing placed?
A lot of the projects are coming to us with a capital provider in place, but SEF does have a published list of their providers that they have already done their due diligence with on their website. They've established a CPACE statewide website as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? And just to confirm, maybe Mr. Lazarus, or I don't know if we have the ability to speak to it here, but before tomorrow night, I want to make sure that we're confident that we have the appropriate resources in place in the Treasury Department, as I understand it, and as Ms. Locke pointed out, our responsibility lies in the fact that we are sort of the collection department for this loan. The money comes to us and then we pass it along. Are you familiar with our capabilities in that regard? Do you feel confident we'll be able to do that?
I do. I've spoken to Mr. Hackett, but before tomorrow evening, Mr. Chair, I'll make sure that we provide a positive statement that we're capable of administering the program.
If there's nothing further, then we will see everyone tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Turning to agenda item number 16, this calls for the approval to send out an RFP for ballot printing and by mail fulfillment for the May 2021 primary election. And I think Ms. Hagan was going to be with us, and I can't remember who's going to jump in her stead. Was that Mr. Martin?
Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is just a simple confirmation of council's authority to issue this RFP, which will be fast-tracked. Assuming approval, will go out the door Thursday morning to parties who have expressed an interest. They know that there's a quick turnaround. Bids will be received next week, and council should have a contract with the selected vendor in front of it for its approval in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would just point out that while the turnaround time is very short, the places this will be going are all experienced election services firms. And, at this point, we do not have a final ballot, and we won't have a final ballot. I mean, I don't know when we'll have a final ballot, but the county's own challenge process won't be just commenced with, or is commencing as of close of business today, because of the final challenges are due as of close of business today. So I think it's a 10-day period after that. The courts, Mr. Martin, usually take about 10 days to hear it. So we are looking then most likely at assuming there aren't appeals beyond the Court of Common Pleas, the earliest we would have a final ballot that could even start to be formatted would be 10 days from today.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, the next agenda item is agenda item number 17, which calls for the adoption of Delaware County's proposed 2021 annual action plan and commencement of a 30-day public commencement period. Program funding includes the Federal Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnerships, and an Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Also included is the spending plan for the County PA Act 137 Affordable Housing Fund. Projects listed are attached, and we have, it says Mr. Savage, but I'm thinking this is probably more Ms. Hill's cup of tea here. So we'll look to Ms. Hill. I think I read that wrong. Ms. Hill.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Council. Today I'm requesting that you adopt, or tomorrow I'll be requesting that you adopt the 2021 Proposed Housing and Community Development Action Plan for the Federal CDBG, Home Investment Partnership, and Emergency Solutions Grant programs, as well as a spending plan for the funds that are collected under the Pennsylvania Act 137, which allows the counties to collect fees that are charged for recording deeds and mortgages to increase the availability and the quality of affordable housing. So the proposed program includes $6.8 million for public improvements, public services, and affordable housing initiatives. As you know, planning for this year's Community Development Block Grant Program began back in October. We made applications available, and then in the evening of December 3rd, Community Development staff had a virtual public hearing, and we followed that up in November with 2 municipal workshops to present the application, review project eligibility, and answer any questions that any of our applicants may have. Proposals were due back in our office on January 6th. Once again, the process was quite competitive. The request greatly exceeded the funding. We received applications of more than $7.1 million in public improvements, and $608,000 plus were requested for public services. And just to mention quickly, summarize the highlights, this plan includes $2.3 million in municipal public improvements that are designed to benefit low and moderate income communities, $1.4 million to nonprofit social service agencies to assist them in helping very low and moderate income residents, 1.4 for the new development or preservation of affordable housing, and about $280,000 to assist qualified low and moderate income home buyers to purchase their first home. So with your approval tomorrow, the proposed plan will be advertised for a 30-day public comment period. In addition, public comments are scheduled to be heard by you at your April 21st council meeting. And then we anticipate a final plan adopted May 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Any questions or comments from council?
Yeah, I'd just like to give a little explanation of how the process that council uses for culling through the great demand that we get for these grants. These grants go to our communities that are designated as needing this type of capital injection. We get a long list of requests from all of the townships and boroughs. As you just heard, over $7 million of requests for a little over $2 million that's available to give in the block grants. So we do a very thorough and robust analysis of each of the requests by looking at the past history of receiving of these funds from that township, the past how much they've gotten over the last 10 years. In addition, we look at what grants they have outstanding and how if they've spent them down, if they have a lot of money that they haven't been able to spend yet. That's a factor that's considered. We look at the level of poverty per person, per population of each of these communities, because even within the CBDG world, there is a spectrum of poverty levels. And we look at the merits of the projects and, of course, the eligibility of the project under the program. So I just wanted to share that, we do a pretty intense analysis of these, and we try to be fair so that all of these communities are getting their fair share, and that they don't get overburdened by, having too many outstanding projects. And this process resulted in the list that we have suggested and are putting forward today.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer, and thank you for working on this with Dr. Taylor. I appreciate that. And thank you, Ms. Hill, for helping to distill what is a confusing thing down to something that even council can understand. Well, most of council, I'm not sure I understand it, but I think everybody else with a bigger brain can.
Can I ask one question of Ms. Hill, and that is, a lot of things go out for public comment and we don't get any public comment, which is probably a function of people not realizing that we actually listen to public comment. But what is your process to advertise the proposed plan that we're adopting and to solicit public comment? I'm just curious.
Certainly. So after you approve tomorrow night, we will have the proposed plan appear in the next Thursday's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer. We post it on our website, and any responses that we get that come to us, we will transmit to you with our recommendation for adopting the final plan. And again, folks will have the opportunity to make their comments directly to council at your public meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, I'm going to pivot back. I was reading off of the wrong agenda. So we do have an agenda item number 17 for Mr. Savage. So I will jump back to that real quickly before we then get back to Ms. Hill. So if you bear with me, Ms. Hill. Number 17 called for the agenda item number 17 called for the approval to advertise for bids for sanitizing polling locations. And we have Mr. Savage, as I said, here to present this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Here, as you said, to request approval to issue an invitation to bid for post-election sanitization of polling locations that have identified the need. We sent out a letter to all the polling locations on February 1st and requested a March 1st response. We've had about 15 locations responded so far.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Savage?
No, just thank you for getting this out. Appreciate it. I think generally speaking, we need to get an RFP out for cleaning and sanitation services. And this one I know is sort of particularly fraught because it all has to be done in a fairly short period of time.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Savage. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to agenda item number 19, which calls for the approval to advertise the attached Housing and Community Development Action Plan amendment as it relates to the CDBG CV program to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. Funds are available through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, Public Law 116-136, subject to a 5-day comment period. And we have Ms. Hill back again.
I am. So thank you. These are additional entitlement community development block grant funds, again, made available to the county to mitigate the impacts of the COVID-19 virus. We've identified 2 projects that are excellent candidates for the CARES funding, and this amendment would add 2 projects. The first is approval to add the Community Arts Center Outreach Senior Program that will serve 40 seniors, and also the Entrepreneur Works Fund to provide micro and small business development services and provide them access to credit. We anticipate they'll be approximately 90 entrepreneurs and small business owners assisted. And I am requesting your approval to add these projects to our existing program, and that is subject to a 5-day public comment period.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? All right, thank you, Ms. Hill. We'll see you tomorrow night then.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 20. This calls for the approval to advertise for construction inspector for ECMS project number 47992. Before I read any more, I will turn to Mr. Bierling, as I'm sure he will take us through it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of council. I'm here to ask for the approval to advertise for construction inspector for ECMS project number 992 for the reconstruction of a new road bridge, County Bridge number 7 in Aston Township, subject to solicitor approval. This is a bridge that was scheduled on our list of bridges to be reconstructed. Bridge number 7 is named Crozierville Bridge. It's located on New Road in Aston Township. It's 54 foot in length, 24 foot wide. It was built in 1931. It will be advertised in the Inquirer and also in the on the Delaware County website. It will also be advertised on PennDOT ECMS site, Engineering, Construction, and Management System. The original construction inspection advertisement and submitted statements of interest are submitted through ECMS. Any construction consultant firm bidding on this project would already be pre-qualified with PennDOT. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bierling. Any questions or comments from Mr. Bierling? All right, hearing none, we will turn to agenda item number 21. And again, this is for Mr. Bierling, so I'll let you take it away, Mr. Bierling.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of council. I'm here today to ask for the approval of CoStar's contract with Goldhorn Electric of 20 Commerce Drive, Aston, PA 19014, to supply and install electric service and Blink electric car chargers for 3 locations. We sent the specs out to 4 CoStar vendors. 2 vendors bid the project. Goldhorn was the lowest price. The other contractor to bid the project was approximately 2.03% higher than what Goldhorn's price was. We got no response, and we've tried to reach out to the vendors a couple different times through email and phone calls, but they've not responded to us. The locations are at Fair Acres Building 14 and at Upper Darby in the parking lot at Sampson and Wilshire Roads, used by Human Services in Upper Darby Township, PA. At the Government Center, the parking area will be at Ambert and Citron Streets immediate. These will be used for pool cars that will be very involved, and the contractor will be excavating the concrete and backfill to support the new car chargers. There will be 5 to 6 inch concrete filled ballards painted safety yellow to protect the chargers. The conduits will be run underground to support the chargers to the new panel. They will have to install a new utility pole at 2 locations in Median and in Upper Darby. The poles will support a new electrical 400 amp service. The work for this, including the labor, materials, and equipment, auger truck, backhoe, for a price not to exceed $159,760. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council?
So can I got a little confused when I was looking at this. It says that it's a CoStar's contract. The contract with the electrician company is a CoStar's vendor?
He's a CoStar's vendor, yes. CoStar is a piggyback system, for the state of Pennsylvania.
Right.
There's many different projects, material. There's all kinds of stuff that you can actually buy off CoStar's. That's where we actually buy our cars, is off a CoStar contract.
Right. I always knew you could use it for equipment and capital things.
Sure.
I didn't really know that services were available on
Yes. Yes, they are.
So you said you bid this out, you bid it out to only CoStar contractors? Is that how?
Yeah, we did it that because the cars are going to be coming in so quick, to try and advertise it and everything else was kind of tight on a tight time frame. So we actually reached out to 4 CoStar's vendors that we got off of, from CoStar's that are in the area. And out of the 4, like I say, 2 responded, 2 didn't respond. And that was the price that we got from Goldhorn Electric. And the other price was approximately 0.03% higher than what the Goldhorn price was.
Okay. And this does not include the actual hardware. That's purchased separately, or the actual units.
The actual unit, no, this includes everything. Yeah.
Oh, so they're purchasing the units.
Yeah, that's what we did. The first time we were going to do, we were going to have them do the electric, and we would provide the chargers, but then it got messed up a little bit. So we put everything in one ball of wax, and they're going to provide everything.
Okay. And that the selection of that particular brand of charger, forget what it is.
It's a Blink.
Is that our spec, or did they recommend it? How did we land?
That was the one that was recommended when I was working with Brian on this to get it done, and that was the one that I think him and the person he was working with trying to get a grant. That's what they had come up with, was the Blink.
Okay.
Because there's a couple different ones now. Now I think Siemens has one, and there's a couple different ones, but Blink was one of the big operators at the time.
Yeah, just to clarify, not me, Brian, Mr. Hudak.
Brian Hudak, yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zidek, I just had one question, and I think on the agenda item, unless I looked at an old one, the budget line for this says MVM capital account, I think, and that if we could get clarity for that, that would be welcome. I don't know what that account is.
When we first started looking at this, and it was going to be done under the motor vehicles, and that's the number I was given. And I know Francine was working on this. I don't know whether she's still on here or not, but if not, I'll have the answer for you by tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Why is it faster to bid this out through a CoStarz contract than it would be to send this out to others that aren't on the CoStarz contract?
Well, with this, we don't have to go out and advertise. So when we advertise, and we got to hold it for a month, so there goes 30 days that we're sitting with it, because it's once we get the bids in, the bids got to sit according to the county code for 30 days. So the bids are sitting there for 30 days. With this, we can actually go and get the prices. And normally you get one or two CoStar prices. We were trying to get 4. And like I say, the prices are so close that it's going to save us time.
Sure, it saves us time, but we don't know whether we would have gotten significantly lower, folks. And I mean, we run the risk of this being rejected at tomorrow night's meeting and have to start all over again because we went through a truncated bidding process. I mean, I for one, I don't think that I will be in favor of this because of the manner in which the bidding was done.
Well, according to the code, the CoStarz is a piggyback program from the state, and that's one that we've used before.
Well, I'm well aware of what the code says, as you know, sir.
Sure.
It doesn't mean it's an optimal way to act. And who suggested that we go down this route of advertising? Was this on your was this your suggestion, or did others make that suggestion to you?
I think others made the suggestion to me because of the time that we were looking for. Because I believe Mr. Hudak has cars coming in. I think he had some coming in somewhere around March 15th. Whether they did or not, I don't know.
So just to be clear then, when the decision is made to go to CoStarz versus going to a formal bidding process, right, that's open to everybody, we save ourselves 30 days, and generally what would drive that would be a timing consideration.
Right, well, you're saving the 30 days. You're probably saving more than that. You're probably saving, I'm going to say, between 45 days and 2 months that you're actually saving in the time frame by the time you get done.
Okay, but what I'm hearing from you is it's generally the decision when it's made to go to CoStarz is, I would assume it's either because there's a CoStarz vendor who's done similar work for the county in the past. They're very reliable. Their prices have been, acceptable, and therefore just to save time, you would do that. Or because in a situation like this, the concern is operational, that we're getting vehicles and there might not be a means to charge these vehicles unless we can get the work done in a faster time frame than the bidding would allow. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly right, Councilwoman.
All right. Thank you for walking us through that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we will also provide a response to your question as to the decision process and why we're recommending the co-storage vendor.
Okay, thank you. And also, this process of getting electric cars has been going on for months and months and months. So the fact that we painted ourselves into a corner that doesn't necessarily make me feel more comfortable about the process being used. We could have been going out and getting these bids at the same time that we were thinking about getting electric cars, and the fact that we didn't doesn't inspire confidence.
And I'm just reminded of when we were buying voting machines. The voting machine options were all available on CoStar's contract, but as was the case there, those CoStar's prices were, it was explicitly said to all the counties, view this as a starting point. That doesn't mean that that's the best price you're going to get. And in fact, it wasn't. We got better pricing after, running through a process with the vendors. So, I don't like the idea that we view CoStars to be a shortcut to what ought to be best practices for, getting the lowest price the county can negotiate.
Yeah, I would just point out, if you want to take that example of the machines, and I'm not as intimately familiar with that process as you or Mr. Zidek would be, not being on council at the time. But I can tell you, had I been on council at the time, and the difference between using CoStars and not using CoStars would have meant having the machines available for the primary or for the general election in 2019, I would have pressed to go to CoStars rather than go out and bid it, because the enormity of not having the machines until 2020 was quite challenging. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I think and I'm not discounting what Mr. Zidek is pointing out. I'm simply saying that for whatever, we've got to improve our lead time on purchasing. We've got to improve our logistics about figuring out what needs to be in place in terms of infrastructure to do new things when we're moving like this. But we are moving very quickly. We are moving in the midst of a pandemic where other priorities have shifted time and attention and literally taken what exists in our purchasing function right now and turned it on its head. And I think I would ask you, what are we, and this may be a question I would ask Mr. Lazarus to address tomorrow night, if we reject this and go to do a bid process, what do we think we might reasonably save based on Mr. Beerling's statement that this is probably higher than we hoped it would be, versus what is the cost of having assets in the form of these new vehicles just sitting someplace because we can't charge them. So I put that out there because that becomes the trade-off. And while I agree with you, Mr. Zidek, from what we ought to be doing, I also don't want to lose the opportunity to put assets to work. There's a cost associated with that too. And I think we need to get a little bit of feedback from our management team about, what, if anything, that cost would be.
Just to put us first to put to bed the example that I brought us down with the voting machines, I can assure you that the decision to delay to the primary of 2020 was not driven by use of CoStars or not CoStars. There were a number of factors in there. But just so for my own edification, Mr. Martin, if there are CoStars prices that are available and the county were to choose to still negotiate off of that, look for a better price than what is off the shelf from CoStars, would the county still have to go through the typical bidding process? Do they have to still advertise for bids and, the whole shebang, the whole process we typically go through? Or could you have CoStars contracts that are there and, call 3 vendors who are off of CoStars and say, look, we realize you're on CoStars. If you want this business, tell us what your best is below CoStars.
I think that second example that you're describing, Councilman, is what occurred in this case. If we're using a CoStar vendor and the pricing is an improvement over the rate that was approved by the state under the CoStar process, that bid can be accepted by the county pursuant to the exception in the code that CoStar fits under.
So just to play this,
I think there's a distinction between the legal requirement and sort of the policy imperative or the policy desire. So I think in this case, the legal requirement was met. There was an attempt to address the policy preferences previously expressed by council by attempting to secure up to 4 alternative efforts at sharpening the pencil over their CoStar bids. 2 responses were received, and that's the one being recommended by the department.
Okay. What is the CoStar's rate? Is it an hourly rate? Is there actually a fixed charge for the installation of an electric charging station that's in CoStar's?
That's all done by the state. The state is the one that
I'm asking you, as the person who reviewed these bids, the rate that comes from CoStar's, is it an hourly rate being charged by the electrical contractor, or is it a fixed rate for the installation of 1 or more electric charging stations?
It's a fixed rate for each one of them, yes.
For the installation of an electric charging station? Any other questions or comments from council? All right, thank you, Mr. Beerling.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 22. This calls for the approval of the Delaware County Industrial Development Authority as the county's economic development authority to administer municipal grants from certain gaming revenues and to receive any uncommitted funds from such revenues at the end of each fiscal year, beginning with 2020, all pursuant to 4 PA CSA 1403C2V. And I believe we have Mr. Lichtenstein here to present this. I see his name on there.
Correct. Yep, I'm here and was not quick enough to click. This is a technical change. There is out of the various slices of gaming revenue that are received by the county, there is restricted revenues from slots that are directed to grants for certain types of municipal activities. Generally, these are restricted to either the county or the municipal governments and related to the costs of the gaming at Harrah's. The statute requires them to be administered by Delaware County through its Economic Development or Redevelopment Authority. And if any uncommitted funds exist, they should be paid to such Economic Development or Redevelopment Authority. Traditionally, these have been paid to the Redevelopment Authority. However, the Redevelopment Authority does act under a fairly restrictive statute. And, especially when, for example, when they were helping out with the business grant program in the last spring and summer, it took a lot of work to figure out how to use Redevelopment Authority monies for these types of grants. So the thought is by directing those monies to the EDA, to the extent their money is available, it will make them easier to spend. That being said, I did confirm with Treasury, and last year, because of the county directs some of these funds to county purposes, such as debt service on the stadium bonds, there were actually no leftover funds for 2020. In fact, there was a deficit against what was budgeted for. And in recent years, from what I understand, from talking to Pat Killian before he left, recent years, there's only been a few $1,000s of that left over. But this is just, going forward, this is usually around the time of the year when the the calculation is made of excess funds for these municipal grants, and they're passed to the RDA, and this instead would just say going forward they're going to be passed to the IDA, to the extent they're available. I don't know, even with this year's gaming revenues, if there'll be enough slots revenue to lead to an excess. There definitely was not in 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Lichtenstein. Any questions or comments from council?
Yeah, I just have two comments I want to make. The first is having these funds go to the IDA rather than the RTDA gives us more flexibility, or not us, that gives the spending, the decision-making body, which would be the IDA, much more flexibility. And in light of the fact that we are doing a whole re-envisioning of our economic development efforts, I think this is entirely appropriate. And there may be a whole re-envisioning of how we use this restricted fund, whether, we may not want to use it for the reimbursement of the EDOB and for gaming, for union fees anymore. So having that flexibility is going to be in our best interest as we move forward with a new strategic plan. The second observation I want to make is that we, as a county, have traditionally not been very successful at being transparent in our budgeting about these types of restrictive funds and what goes into them, what goes out of them. They don't really show up in our budgeting process. And we have had a commitment. We have received a commitment from our staff and from Mr. Lazarus on down that we are going to work on this, and that with the 2022 budgeting process, these types of restricted accounts that take in money and distribute them will become more transparent and will become part of our visible budgeting process. So I wanted to just make that point. This is a really good example of that. I think we're making progress on that front. And for the 22 process, this type of account will be part of our discussion.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council?
Mr. Zidek, just a comment. Last year when council, the memorandum that was connected to the agenda item when you created the Interactive Gaming Authority, that was new and was able to capture funds. I just want to let you know that $78,907 was transferred to the new authority that was just done by Treasury. So that source of funds is now operative because of the actions council took last year.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
was hoping
Phillips.
that would be more because, interactive gaming, that is the one kind of gaming people could do in the last year. But maybe it'll grow with time.
Yeah, my understanding is it's just the taxation in Pennsylvania on those and on that source of gaming is high, so it detracts from people playing. But there's certainly enough commercials about it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on agenda item number 22? All right, agenda item number 23 calls for the approval of the compensation study structure recommended by McGrath Human Resources Management with a full implementation date of June 1, 2021. And we have, I believe, we have Mr. Kane here to present this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of County Council and invited and distinguished guests. This morning, we are ready to present both the implementation, the approval of the structure, requesting the approval of the structure, and the implementation plan for the compensation study that has been going on here for at least the last year. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to share. May I do so? So this morning, we are going to do an update on what we have done since January of 2021. We came back to council at that particular moment to give an update, and now after 2 months, we have further information that we want to provide and to go forward on this process. And he's trying to get the mouse to cooperate. I have 3 monitors in my office, and I can't seem to get the mouse to cooperate with any of them. So bear with me, please. So we have, since we met you last, we've done some reviews. We have a salary structure we'd like to show you this morning, an implementation plan, the cost of this particular program, the activities that still need to go on, and the implementation timeline. Since January 17th, we have met on a regular basis with department directors who had concerns about where employees were being placed in their grids. We also met with the independent elected officials, and we've met with the president judge and addressed concerns and his direct reports about concerns about the salary placements. And we finalized all pay grade adjustments. We've done that over the last 2 months. This is a sample of what the new salary structure will look like. It's a 10-step salary schedule. We have never had a salary schedule here at the county before, so this is our first attempt. In many cases, in my previous roles at other places, we already had an existing process. We tried to improve upon it. Here, we're building it really from the bottom up. So in this step structure of step 1 through step 10, our goal is to get everyone to step 1 first. And what you see on the screen are 2 of the grades, the G grade and the H grade. And these are above the administrative positions that we offer, but below the fully professional positions. So we have administrative specialist and assistant county clerk and some other positions you'll see on this list. And you'll see what we want to start people at and then what we want to get them to. The ultimate goal is to get them to step 7, which is where that fits the midpoint of the market data that we received from the survey work done by McGrath and Associates. The advance is 1 step a year with, again, it's acceptable performance, and that's, we will talk about in a little bit about putting together an appraisal process. You advance in the range based on a budgeted percentage per year with, again, acceptable performance. Once you've received the maximum of the grade at step 10, there are no additional increases that will go above the maximum. Your grade and that G grade will be priced so that once you've hit the max, you're being paid more than fairly to the market. And then these steps that you see on the screen here will be reviewed on an annual basis, and they'll be reviewed in a number of different ways. So what makes up these particular ranges and grades? Well, there were 15 position competencies that were looked at back in March of 2020. Those competencies include things like the role, the tasks, the impact and decisions and the consequences of errors, planning, confidential data that they're dealing with, tools and resources, stress. A lot of these things were factored into the role of the questionnaire. We also then used the comparative external market. And again, defined here is what those, what external market really means. What compression is. We've talked a lot about compression in previous session, and so you understand where compression is. It's that separation, that wage separation between those positions in the market, and making sure that we don't have newer employees making almost the same amount as an employee who's been here for 5 to 7 years. And of course, internal equity is positions that have similar subset. So it's important to be able to look at all 4 of these categories when setting up the grades. A little bit about the implementation process. We have identified the costs for this program in 2 phases. First phase is to bring all non-bargaining employees that are below the minimum to step 1. That's the first and foremost goal of the implementation plan. And the second goal is to place the remaining non-bargaining employees on a step, on a particular step. Place on the closest step above without a salary decrease, and no adjustment will be made for employees who are above or the max of the grade. Those have a separate cost, but the estimated cost for the first 2 phases of implementation are $2.2 million. And I will show later, this is the amount of money that was budgeted for under our compensation budget that was provided by County Council last year. So here's an example, a sample of 2 departments. The first department is Public Works. And it'll show you public title that's currently in place. The recommended title is the new title that these jobs will have. And these recommended titles are based on what's out there on the market. So when we go to take salary data down, we can use these titles to get us better and more effective data. You see what the hourly rate currently is, and then where the hourly rate would go. In the first example, in the contract assistant, that person is at market right now, is being paid at the right step. But with the office manager, the project manager, there are adjustments that will be made in their salary based on where they fit in the step process. So this is one example. We wanted to use 2 what we think were very tangible examples. This is a little more involved, but this gives you information about the current title in the planning department, where they're currently at on hourly rate, the number of hours they work, and what their annual salary was in 2019. And then moving forward, what their new ranges will be and what their new pay grade will be, their salary would be, and then adjustments that will be made. So you'll see, for example, the data and systems coordinator will move to a data specialist, and that will be similar to other people that are in data specialist grades. Planning technician, the same thing. There are some jobs that are very comparable in other parts of the county. So we want to have those jobs bundled together and packaged correctly. So you'll see that what we're going to do in this process is go through with Ms. Hill, for example, in this case, sit down with her and go through this process and see who will be adjusted accordingly. And this will bring us that idea of we're being more competitive with pay, and gives us a basis to then talk about next steps to how to do this on a sustainable basis. So there are additional activities that need to be done if council should approve this morning, tomorrow night. One will be looking at fair labor standards evaluations, making sure people that are listed as salaried employees meet the salary test under the FLSA, and that will be done after this structure is approved on. 2, making sure employees are placed with the correct new job title. We are going to be continuing to look at work hours. We had questions during our analysis process of, we have employees make at 35 hours a week, at 37 and a half hours a week, and at 40 hours a week. Many of them are contractual, but there are questions about why certain employees are scheduled at 40 hours a week versus 35. So we want to have those continued discussions with the departments. We have a commitment to have a brand new job description in the next 6 months for every position here at the county. Before my arrival, I took the job descriptions were submitted to McGrath and Associates. I've seen the job descriptions, and I think we can do a much better job. And I believe with the additions that are coming to my staff, we'll have the opportunity to go back and look at every job description and make sure they're consistent, that they meet the ADA responsibilities we have, the Fair Labor Standards Act responsibilities, and also can be used as very good tools, both for performance evaluation and market data. We also want to, at some point, start to discuss a performance appraisal system, something in which conversations can be had with supervisor and employee, and make the process relatively simple, but that we talk about performance in a very simple and direct way, so that at the end of the year, when we make adjustments in people's salary, they're going to be based on those set of goals, attainment of goals, and how to set goals for the future year. And then finally, there will be another market survey. We want to go out to the market again and make sure that our data is correct, and that will impact the grid that you saw earlier. That will impact as we look at jobs and say, what is the market paying for these types of positions? So as regards to the implementation plan, County Council approved the FY budget for a 3% increase. Council approved a 1% increase and a 2% allowance for adjustments related to the compensation study. So all non-union, non-bargaining employees were provided a 1% increase effective January 1st of 2021. And the 2% allowance of that particular compensation budget equates to $2.2 million. So that is our intention to start the process and work with that budget for the next few months. So our goals, and this is the last slide, our goals would be to present today and tomorrow and receive approval for implementation and the structure. Then we would move forward to April, and there'll be a lot of work in between, but start to meet with the president judge, the independent elected officials, and the county department heads with the recommended salary adjustments. In April, we would work with the controller's office, particularly Rick Magaro in payroll and in operations, the deputy director of operations, and start to build that new salary structure into the payroll system. And finally, and the last thing is target that date as the implementation, the implementation for non-union, non-bargaining employees. So I ask County Council to review this and on tomorrow night's agenda to approve the structure and the implementation plan.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question just operationally, if it's appropriate at Mr. Zidek, is it okay?
Sure. Well, I don't know what you're going to say, but I presume it'll be okay.
My question is really just relating to this last slide with the rollout. Has with in terms of payroll operations and stuff, do they have the resources they need to be able to do this? Is this the sort of thing where they may need to go to IT and get additional support built in to be able to meet this timeline? I just don't want to. I know that they've had so much to do with all the changes that have been going on, and I just want to make sure that we've appropriately resourced this project, which is, I know, been one of Mr. Bellata's goals in IT.
So thank you for that question, Councilwoman Ruther. And the response to your question is that if we get approval to move forward with this on St. Patrick's Day, I'll remind everybody it's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow night.
I'm planning on wearing my green, just so you know.
I shall too. And if we do receive approval, the next step is the next day I sit with Rick Magaro. And I sit with Rick Magaro. I try to sit with him once a week. And so we try to solve problems like this. This is not a problem. This is how do we plan out the process going forward? There'll be an active participation by Ms. Nardi and by other staff here in HR, but primarily it should be with the approval of Ms. Phillips, Mr. Magaro and I working together and planning it now so we can have it as a smooth transition for June 1st. Again, the structure is really housed in HR, but in terms of processing the payroll, that is something that we will work out with the controllers. That's why we have this time frame built in to work with them together. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
I had I'm sorry, did you need to follow up?
I'm finished, thanks.
Okay. The implementing this with regard to the president judge, the independent elected officials, and who have their own authority to hire, fire, and manage their departments. Presumably, they could agree to this or not, and that would be their prerogative. Our, as I understand it, our limitation is that we provide them with a budget, and they can spend that budget as they, in their own rights, decide to spend it. Have I got that right, Mr. Martin? Or I'm not sure if you're the appropriate person to ask that question of, or somebody else.
I don't think it's an analysis that leads itself to a 2 or 3 sentence summary. As you indicated, there are decisions of the state courts that rest with independent elected officials the rights to hire, fire, and supervise. Those rights also extend to the courts. Separately, the courts have certain rights under a constitutional analysis of separation of powers as between the judiciary and the executive. I know that Mr. Kane has been engaged in a consultative process with the elected officials and also with the president judge, as he's indicated in his presentation. The suggested changes for the non-represented employees will be presented to those individuals over the next several weeks. And we would hope that they would agree with the county's recommendation as to the proposed adjustments. If we hit a situation where they object to them, we'll address that circumstance down the road.
Yeah, I would just like to, I think the approach that Mr. Kane is taking and that Mr. Martin's outlined is the correct one. And ideally, this is collaborative. I think it is important, and I state this only for myself, not for the rest of council, because we haven't had this conversation. But if you look at the role of under the county code of the salary board, if our role as a personnel board, which is what we call it in Delaware County, I do think one has to acknowledge that council is responsible for generating the revenue or finding the revenue that pays all of the employees of Delaware County, whether they work for the courts or the Register of Wills or the DA or the controller or whoever. Maybe not the DA and not the judges themselves, because they're paid by the state or through the state, or their salaries are matched or mandated by the state. But since we have to find that revenue, and we're the people who sit here and the only people who have the ability to raise taxes, I think it goes to more than just giving the independent electeds a budget and letting them decide how to spend it. Because every time you create, they can't go out and spend it on something that's a long-term obligation if they have no means of funding it. And I think when we employ people, it's an ongoing reoccurring expense. And that is why I think personally, I'd be very uncomfortable ceding to anybody who doesn't actually have to make the vote to raise taxes to pay those salaries, if that is in fact what's needed to be done, gets to approve adding headcount. I think I have nothing to say about who an independent elected or who the courts choose to hire. I would respect their managerial prerogatives in terms of recommending raises and things. But I do think, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, and this is not a legal conclusion. It's just one that it is, I think perhaps the best way to do this is collaboratively. I hope we move forward in that fashion. I think Mr. Kane and his team have been working hard at that. But it is, it's more than, I think our role is more than just handing them a budget and say, do with it as you will.
Mr. Zidek, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think I would like to just say that I have been proud of the work that we've been able to do working with the independent elected officials and with the president judge. And communication is very key in this process. And I have made sure that I've made myself available at all times to both the president judge and the 4 independent electeds. We'll continue to do so. This is a critically important project here in human resources and in personnel. I would like to make sure I acknowledge the work of Amy Nardi, incredible work here, and what she's done to manage the process and really work with every department. I believe we have a plan in place that will bring some certainty to salaries, and also it will serve as the personnel plan for us going forward. And I think that's 2 large steps in the process that council wanted to see done. But I think your answer, Ms. Ruther, is exactly right. We need to be open and we need to listen.
I have a couple questions, if I may. First, I want to say, just sort of globally, we have desperately needed this overhaul, or an overhaul. And I want to point out that over a third of our workforce is retirement eligible. So we need to have competitive pay scale to attract talent. And that's what we want to do. You know, this council wants this organization to be top-notch professional talent. And rehauling this compensation system in a thoughtful way is the only way to go about that. So no doubt that that we're heading in the right direction. I do have just three little questions, sort of logistic questions. One, one of the next steps is to make sure that all the employees that are currently here, non-union, are in the right categories. And I'm just curious, who is making that decision? Are you working with the actual directors to make sure that's happening? Or are you getting input from the employees themselves? How's that happening?
So we're working strictly through directors at this point. Councilwoman Schaefer, we're meeting them on a regular basis. So they have had 3 iterations of which they've seen these charts that we showed here in the PowerPoint presentation. So they've seen this already. The next step is we're going to share with them how now those employees are going to be affected from a pay adjustment. So it'll be working through the directors first.
And that they will have an opportunity, the directors will have an opportunity to say, oh, Joe Smith, that is not the right place for them. They do much more than that type of adjustment.
That's right. You know, for example, you know, we would sit down with every department head and they will have a sheet that looks very similar to the sheet we showed earlier from the planning department, where they would see the current and now the future. And they'll have a chance to look at that and be able to address it. Again, we think we'll be in general agreement. I think we would argue that we were in general agreement about 85% of the time in the first couple runs. So I don't see us being any closer, any below that. And I think we'll be closer to a 90%, the 95% acceptance rate. But again, at this particular point, it's working with the directors and looking at everybody individually.
Okay. Another question, what is the plan for union and how is that next step, or is that happening simultaneously, or?
Yeah, so that there is a plan for union negotiations that this will serve as a centerpiece. I don't want to do contract negotiations right now. So I will say this will be part of our process as we start to talk with the unions.
Okay. And then my last, I know I voiced this when I met and saw this the first time, is my one concern about this is that, you know, there's a cap, there's a step 10 or whatever it is, where somebody could even achieve at a relatively early part of their career, given where we're starting. And I worry about that in terms of retention. And I am wondering, you know, is the plan for someone who has achieved the top step in their grade to offer training, to offer, you know, finding the next level position, getting out of that whole, what is the plan for those people who achieve the top?
So, Ms. Shaver, that's a very, very good question. And I'm going to try to give you a very good answer. It's a combination of all 3. Number 1 is we have people that are in their jobs and they really like what they do and they're very good at what they do. And speak to your question earlier about a third of the population is eligible for retirement. We've got to get our population ready to go to be able to fill those key positions. So that's first. You do that from a combination of training. And as you may know, we've brought on a new person who's going to be leading us for training exercises and training opportunities. And part of training will be leadership training, you know, getting those next leaders of the county ready to go that are here right now, and maybe some that are new. But in terms of the caps, compensation system says, you know, you pay people what the market pays, you have factors that we've already gone over, and then you make a decision about where that is. And the structure itself that you saw earlier will not, you know, will be alive. Will not be static. So we'll be doing cost of living reviews of what the cost of living is. We'll be looking at the market data every year, and those ranges will just which way that the camera tells you to go to, but this way they will go north, and we will keep up with the market. That's another factor here that you must keep your grid up to date and accurate. That will help some of the people that are at that end. It will not help everybody, but it'll help some. And then, there's other opportunities we need to talk about. I don't think I have all the answers today, but I think those 3 areas are what you addressed, and I think I agree with you. Training, enticing people to look at other opportunities, and third, retirement will solve some of those problems. Those people who wish to retire.
If I can add, a challenge that we're trying to address is providing consistency among job titles and what people do, and even out what the skill level is at each position. By doing that, we do create the opportunity for part of our team members to go look and see what other jobs are out there and how they can advance within the structure. The benefits to that are we spread expertise throughout the county. We also avoid culture coming from developing within certain parts of the county structure. So I think it leads to a more robust and workforce dedicated to their own advancement. And those are some side benefits that are intended to be part of the structure that we create.
One more add on to Howard's comment, Elaine, is my goal eventually is to post that grid that you just saw, maybe not looking like that, but something similar on our county website.
Mm-hmm.
What that will do is help us recruit. That will help us identify jobs that are in the county. They can look and see what it gets paid, and they can also see what the complexity and the education and experience requirements are. It'll allow us to recruit from a wider base than we've done before, and it'll tell people, if I want to work for the county, this is what they pay, and this is what it takes to do. I can do that job. Let me apply. I think it'll help us in an immense sense with that changeover in the workforce when we try to get other people to look at the county as a choice, as a place of choice, as an employer of choice.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts, and I first want to echo some of Elaine's sentiments. When you sort of make a list of what the county has accomplished in a year, this is probably not going to be the sexiest thing on the list. It really is sort of a very in the weeds element of effective governance. But, and I've said this before, our most valuable asset is our people. It's really what this county's government is about, is the people who commit their time to the service of the public. And it is vital that we have an awareness of how we are compensating folks, how that relates to the broader market. And at the end of the day, it's going to allow us to be more efficient with taxpayer dollars to make sure that we do our best to hire the best and retain the best. So it's really, I know this is like mind-numbingly boring stuff for the average person, but it's really important that we have a system in place. And it's also important because unlike any other, private organization, transparency is so important. I think there's been a perception, and probably a very valid one, that in the past, what folks were paid by the county and, what their jobs were, how they got it, was all very opaque to the public. So I do think it's very important that we, more so than a typical private enterprise, are very transparent with the public about what jobs pay in the county, what these jobs are tasked with doing, and how the job requirements relate to them as a potential candidate. So I really want to applaud Jim and the entire team for going through what I know has been a very, very challenging process, one that there's always going to be criticism and folks who would like to do something differently, but to sort of corral through that and to get to where we are today, I know took a lot of effort, and I appreciate their endurance with doing so despite the challenges of getting here.
Thank you, Councilman. By the way, I take some umbrage with the fact that this is not sexy. And my job is to bring sexy back.
Rest assured, it has
Say
never
that
left.
wearing green tomorrow.
I've got no response to that.
Sexy has never left Delaware County. All right. Anything further on agenda item number 23? All right. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I'm going to look to. I've recused myself from the next agenda item, so I'm going to look to Dr. Taylor to discuss this one.
Yes, so agenda item number 24 calls for the approval to award benefits brokerage consultancy contract to Aon, Treon, Lockton, with an effective broker of record date to be negotiated immediately. This is going to be subject to solicitor approval, and I believe Mr. Kane is also presenting on this.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We had worked very hard on a solicitation for requests for qualifications for a new benefits broker. We put that bid out on September the 11th of 2020. We received bids back in late October, early November of 2020. We then hit a little bit of a storm with combination of COVID, elections, the hack that occurred, and a number of other impediments, but struggled through and got it started again. We got 12 bids for our benefits brokerage business. A lot of interest around both the region and even nationally for our business. We selected 7 vendors that we thought best represented what Delaware County was looking for. And interviews were conducted on February the 18th and 19th with members of this group, some members of this group on that committee. We narrowed the combination of the number of vendors from 7 to 3. And those are the 3 that were listed on the agenda last week when I presented to Ms. Coogan, because we were still making final decisions. We met on last Thursday, and members of this committee were on the final selection committee, as well as a dozen leaders from around the county. And I'd like to thank all of them for their role in being involved in this process. For first and foremost, my own team of Ms. Nardi, Ms. Heisey Terrell, and Ms. Hatton, who was very instrumental during the process before she retired. And then also Ms. Ruther, Mr. Madden, and Ms. Schaefer, who sat through talk about lack of sexy. The benefits brokerage process does have some weaknesses there. We met 3 vendors last week, Aon, Tryon, and Lockton. All 3 provided tremendous proposals and really presented well to all of us. But in the final analysis, by the consensus of our committee, we selected Tryon as the new benefits broker to recommend to County Council for approval. We still need to negotiate the contract, but we wanted to get the approval done first. Tryon is located both in King of Prussia and in Conshohocken. They have a penetration in many different markets around the area. Primarily, they are the broker of record for Montgomery and Chester County, as well as a consortium of school districts that some reside in the regional area. But more importantly, Tryon is backed by Marsh McLennan, which is a major organization that also provides insurance programs. Tryon has been around for over 25 years. Their leadership has recently changed, but their person that's now leading the organization has been there for a long time. We think Tryon will do a tremendous job in providing service and addressing another part of the total compensation package, which is benefits, and what we can do to save money on benefits, provide solid benefits for our employees, and be innovative and creative. We have issues on retiree medical. We have issues on the actuarial side of our retirement benefits. And quite frankly, we've had issues in the past about really identifying what the compensation is for the broker of record. We will be able now to address that with the new vendor. And so I think we're very comfortable and very secure in this recommendation. I also would like to, again, as I thank the members of the committee, I think I'd be hard pressed not to also thank Gallagher Benefit Services, who has been representing us for the last 15 years. They've done very good work for us. Even recently, just did an outstanding job on a matter that I wrote to them at 12 midnight, and they answered it next morning. I think their organization has done well for the county, but at the same time, I think we have a opportunity to really improve and move forward in the process. So I recommend that Tryon be awarded the new benefits brokerage and consulting contract effective after the successful negotiation of the contract, and again, subject to solicitor's approval.
Mr. Kane, one question I hope you could sort of elaborate on a bit to the extent that it's appropriate. This is an area that is notoriously opaque in terms of how brokers get paid. And you alluded to it briefly that that's something that was considered in this process. To the extent that it's appropriate, can you speak a bit more to how we are ensuring that there is transparency with how our broker is being paid?
Fair question. Thank you. I think where we have the opportunity in the initial contract, we can negotiate those fees and services. Basically, brokers are paid in 3 different ways. 1 is a fee for service basis. 2 is accepting of commissions to reduce that fee. And 3, a combination of both sides. There are people in this call that can answer this question better than I can, but I will say that this is really how brokers, for the most part, get paid. They get paid by either commission or fee or a combination of both. And our job is to negotiate those fees up front and to make it transparent that this is what things are going to cost and that these are going to be the services provided. And if we do that effectively, we'll be able to say, when someone calls me and says, how much are we spending for this? I can give an easy answer to it. It's not right now, is not as transparent as it probably could be. And I think that's important to identify. But I think that's the general answer I would give to that question. Does that make sense? Because it is an opaque issue, Kevin. I think that there's no question about it. There's all kinds of different arrangements to go into. You become a new client, all of a sudden you get a reward for getting that client in. Then there are fees. Then there are renewals. And we want to be able to identify all those issues up front in the new relationship. We've had this relationship with Gallagher for many years because it goes even before the 15 years that Gallagher Benefits has been involved. So we have a chance to do it right the first time.
Yeah, I would add that, I participated in the first round of interviews, which I think there were 7 providers who came in. Some of them really interesting, even though they didn't make the cut. But it was a consistent question to all of them. Are you going to help us understand all of the ways you get compensated by virtue of having the county as your client? And we asked them, what are the different ways that you get compensated? And we got some really interesting answers. I think we know what, we certainly have a little bit more visibility into what we need to ask for. I think some of them were far more forthcoming than others, but it was an education, and Mr. Kane and his staff are there. So I'm sure they will be following up on all of the information and lessons learned from that process. But, the other, in addition to figuring out, how are they being compensated and what are they making off of this? I think what we were looking for were people who were innovative, as Mr. Kane said, especially in terms of helping us address the sort of large OPEB liability that we have associated with retiree health benefits, and to help us make sure that we are effectively communicating with all of our employees. And I think, as we all know, our employees, while I think we need to do a better job of reflecting the county as a whole in our workforce, they still represent a very diverse group of people from an income and education and digital access perspective. Even at work, we have a lot of employees in the county who do a lot of work for the county, who are entitled to benefits. They're full-time, but they do not have an email address. They do not have they're not regularly logging on to computers here at the county. So how are we going to communicate with them, and how are we going to do it in a time of COVID, and how are we going to keep them informed and educate them about what their choices are? And that was a criteria that we took into account. And I certainly think Tryon had some good answers in the sessions I was in. I was in with them. So I just put that out there.
You know, the other thing, I think we had a really tough decision to make. I think the vendors did a tremendous job, and I think Christine would support that. They really, and Kevin would support that also, and Elaine sitting through that. They really did a good job in trying, knowing, and really expressing that they wanted our business. I think that's something that we were looked at as a thought and practice leader in the conversation, that we were giving as much back as they gave, because we were asking thoughtful questions. I will identify both Christine and Dre McComas as people who had, come in and had smack questions right away to ask that were really done based on research. So I think our committee was a good group. Bill D'Amico, Sandy Garrison, Beth Roulette, Mr. Lazarus, Dre, Joanne Phillips was involved. So there was a lot of good people. And oh, by the way, my apologies. I left Christine off that list last time, so I apologize. I was too busy watching Bruno Mars on the Grammys. But no, I think this has been vetted very well. And I think by the committee, and this is not my choice, it's a county choice.
I could add, we had 3 really qualified finalists, so it really boils down to a couple of tangibles and intangibles. Jim talked about whether or not we are an important customer to the firm providing the brokerage, and I certainly feel that Tryon passed that hurdle. It was also very interesting throughout the process to see how the state of information sharing has progressed, and really particularly to Ms. Ruther's point about how individuals can access the services were things that I look for as well. So as Jim said, I think we had 3 highly qualified firms, but to me the difference was the significance of us as a customer, the experience, concrete examples of saving money and cutting costs in this market in southeastern Pennsylvania, and then the technology that'll be available to help us manage our benefits costs. We're all really deciding factors in my mind.
Just procedurally, do we need to update the agenda to actually have the one name that's being proposed?
We do.
Okay, so I will.
Mr. Madden, my apologies. It is updated. I inadvertently sent you a previous version, but on the one on the website, it does say Tryon.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you, Ann. And thank you, Mr. Kane. Are there any other questions or comments from council on this agenda item? All right. Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Kane. And moving on to agenda item number 24. Mr. Zidek.
Thank you. I think we're on item number 25 on my list, unless I'm wrong on that. Yeah, so that's calls for the approval to amend the term of professional services agreement with Mary Ann Jackson to provide services as the interim director of elections to begin January 1, 2021, instead of February 1st, 2021. And I believe Mr. Lazarus is going to present this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a no-cost change to the agreement to amend the start date. But for both this item and the next one, by way of explanation, I spoke to the Board of Elections in late December about managing the clock for the May primary, knowing how disruptive the process was to go through November, and that was by necessity. The May primary in many ways is a more complicated election than the November general election was, and we wanted to put in place the support necessary so that we could even out some of the highs and lows in addressing the election process. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the Board of Election to meet before the first meeting in January, and this did not appear on council's agenda until the 16th of January. So there were some errors in the start date. Ms. Jackson and Ms. Crony both did provide some service during the month of January that I think it's fair to compensate for them. However, there is no increase in the total cost of either agreement. Earlier today, we talked about the beginning of our new employment for our new elections director. So I think the duration of these agreements can be adjusted without any adverse impact.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council on agenda item number 25?
I just want to make sure Mr. Martin's reviewed it or will have reviewed it.
Yes, it's it really is as simple as council previously approved a February 1 start date. There were some hours billed by the individuals in January. We need to have the contract match up with the hours in order to get it paid out of the controller's office.
Thank you.
Pick up on that very last tidbit that Mr. Lazarus just mentioned, that given the fact that we have just hired a permanent director of elections, these two contracts duration may change. I want to just put it out there that these two contracts are for really high level talent in project management. And if we ever get an inflow of vaccine to a level where we are going to have to be really, really pushing it out, we might need some really high level project managers. So I just want to put it out there that it's something to think about.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. And I think 26 does contemplate some of that, but that holds true for Ms. Jackson as well. Yes. Any other questions or comments from council on agenda item number 25? All right, then we'll move on to 26. This calls for the approval to amend the term of the professional agreement with Christina Peroni to provide project management services in relation to the May primary election, improvements to the medical examiner's facilities and operations, formation of the county health department, and other initiatives to begin January 1 instead of February 1st, 2021. And perhaps I'm reading more into that than Ms. Schaefer than should have been read into, but I think your point was well taken. We have Mr. Lazarus to present this again. I'm not sure if there's anything additional on this one or if it's sort of a rehash of the last, but I'll turn to you, Mr. Lazarus.
Mr. Chair, the reason for the amendment is the same. The difference between these two contracts is at the time we awarded them, I wasn't sure that the election was going to take all of Ms. Peroni's time. And we do have a need for a skilled and gifted project manager, depending upon the availability. And speaking to both Ms. Peroni and Ms. Jackson, I did reiterate, though, that the number one priority is the election.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on agenda item number 26?
I would just make one comment, really, with both respect to item 25 and 26, and that is that while this director of elections position, has been filled, it is a new position, and there really isn't anybody sort of to onboard this person other than Ms. Jackson and Ms. Peroni. And for example, I've got a call tomorrow with the Department of State to talk about the shore system upgrade and requirements that counties, the size of Delaware County, need to have in place to be able to effectively administer a mail-in election. And, I know I need Ms. Jackson's help to be able to bring that there. And she has indicated, one of her goals is to make sure there can be a smooth handoff, not just to, understand what's been done so far in terms of restructuring the election departments and introducing her to the people who are there, introducing him, I'm sorry, to the people who are there, but also to make sure that that our new director gets connected with all the various stakeholders that they will have to be dealing with, because as we learned in this last election, the number isn't getting any smaller, it's just getting bigger. So I do think there does need to be some continued work, and I'm not 100% sure what Mr. Allen's arrival date is because of, he is relocating to come here.
In my discussions with him, we can expect him to be here at month's end.
All right, any other questions or comments on agenda item number 26?
I'm going to only comment that I request that these amendments be done as soon as possible so that no one is working for the county without a signed contract.
Anything further? All right, moving on to agenda item number 27. This calls for the approval of professional service agreement with ACD Telecom LLC to manage the design, acquisition, implementation of a comprehensive emergency communication system for the County of Delaware at a base fee amount of $737,606.75 and an additional contingency amount of 15%. And I believe we have Mr. Boyce here to present this. Mr. Boyce.
Good morning and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Today represents an opportunity for the county to move our radio system one step further. Over the last several months, the County of Delaware advertised for professional engineers to lead the project, the technical specifications of our radio system as we move forward. We openly bid that. We received a number of competent firms. Over a course of several weeks, we interviewed every firm for their talents, their cost savings, which was probably the last deciding point, and their ability to serve us. One of those firms, first I'd like to speak that all the firms were strong, but one of those firms stood out in our opinion, and that is the ACD Telecom engineering company. They are based out of Lakewood, Florida, but have offices here in the Commonwealth. ACD is experienced with radio systems, the project management skills we're looking for. They've done work for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and our colleagues in Chester County as well. In reviewing this, again, my team went over the specifications. This was a several month process. I'd like to thank the executive director in the solicitor's office, Mr. Lichtenstein, and an attorney working on the project, Mr. Friedman, as well, who all kind of contributed to get to where we want. The scope of the work that we're asking for is generally three big phases. One, to this year develop specifications for a new 7-800 radio system. Those specifications will be able to be openly bid by major manufacturers. During that period, the ACD would be responsible for meeting with the manufacturers, taking them to sites, making sure that when they develop a bid proposal for the county, that it's accurate, fair, and not with a lot of future surprises. They would then help the county review those bids for technical qualifications along with our team. Once the county were to decide to award a contract, they would be responsible for oversight that the project was done to our specifications, that we're getting what we paid for. And lastly, they'd be responsible for decommissioning the older system. So it is a rather comprehensive project. To go over some of the performance things I'd like to highlight on this is we do expect just in milestones to by late summer to have the specifications out for public bid. By January of next year, we would hope to be in front of council with a proposal for their consideration for the radio system. Over the next course of the year, I guess we lose track of which year we're in, 22, we would build out the system. And then in 23, we'd be doing acceptance testing and completion. So again, I would defer to the contract components to my colleagues in the solicitor's office who spent a good deal of that, and the executive director's leadership and hopefully confidence in that we've got measurable milestones to perform from.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Any questions for Mr. Boyce on agenda item number 27?
Can you hear me? You can't hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Can you give the timelines again?
Yes. Again, assuming that we're under contract and this project, the implementation phase really, we hope to be back for an award for council's consideration by the end of this year. with kickoff of the project, physically building out the radio system in early 22. It's for the delivery part, we're looking about 439 days. We work with many of the manufacturers, and they're excited about this very large project. The only one that's always the outlier is site acquisition. And again, Ms. Schaefer, I appreciate your leadership on the grants for tower construction. That really will not be clear until we get bids back, whether we need to build towers, reinforce towers, or can go off existings. But we do have that budgeted in as that kind of window.
So I noticed I really looked in that contract for dates and they're recognizably absent in the contract itself. Is that on purpose, or, you know, I couldn't find I couldn't find a timeline in the contract.
Oh, well, Ms. Schaefer, that's my apologies. There's a lot been going on. I have a schedule of work, and I'll send that over to council.
That would be great.
With it, but I concur that we break it into phases, which is correlated to the contract of how we're paying out. The procurement phase is listed as 212 days. The implementation phase is 439. But there is a schedule to work. Obviously, once we bid this, you know, this would be one of the items that we go over with any responsible bidder. But I do apologize. And last but not least, I really strongly emphasis on subject to the solicitor's approval. I think we're comfortable with the scope of work, my team. However, there were just a few minor elements that the executive director, under his leadership, wanted to make sure that the milestones and payments were very clear. So the solicitor does get one more bite at this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Boyce? All right, then we'll move on to agenda item number 28, which calls for the approval to purchase a 70 kV three-phase generator and support equipment from Multi-Quip in the amount of $80,865. And this is going to be presented by Mr. Boyce again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next three items all include major purchases for our vaccination sites. The county's plan includes a large public site tentatively scheduled for the Delaware County Community College. This equipment is all support equipment that would go there. In building out the community college, the council has already approved the authorization of modular office buildings. Some are rented and some are owned by the county. The theory being, and I support the practice, that we may be here for a while, we may be in other parts of the county, so we're looking to get some portable equipment. When it comes to the electrical equipment, we absolutely need quality equipment. We need equipment that's portable, and then we need equipment that can really, and all the things we do is multi-service. So all three of those are in support of this. The first one is a large generator, 70,000 kilowatt generator. It's also a three-phase. Specifically, the modular office, the modular vaccination equipment we bought requires us a three-phase generator this size. We own a larger generator. The problem is when you use a larger generator, there's a technical term called wet stacking, where it's too much power and it doesn't run. The generators that we've researched here, we have a lot of experience with generator. Two of my staff members have been to generator school and are my in-house experts. I don't rely on the salespeople. But this generator that we're asking for under this one would be specific for that. Some of the things that make this unique, it's three-phase, which is in quality. And the other feature we're up against is the ability to operate computers off these things, that they're synced and don't short things out, and noise abatement. Cheaper generators always come with more noise. So my staff has recommended this model. And I'm just to referring to where we've got our pricing on this one. We are able to not source identical models. There are other models in the marketplace, a little bit higher and a little bit less. But for the quality, and this is why this has been promoted by my team, sir.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
eligible for funding from the American Rescue dollars that we get?
Excuse me, Ms. Schaefer, for the last little bit, your audio is very faint, at least on my end. Perhaps you could consider increasing it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
If I get close.
All right, I'm asking if we think that these expenses will be eligible under the American Rescue dollars that we expect to receive.
I'll defer to Mr. Lichtenstein. John, I think you did review this.
It could be that. There's also, I think at the moment, I'll defer to Howard. There is some leftover CARES Act money, which is being used to cover vaccination costs until such as a preliminary allocation, unless some additional monies come in that are directly tied to vaccinations, in which case you spend the more specific monies first.
Sorry, I didn't know if Mr. Lazarus was going to jump in there.
I'm sorry, I lost my sound. If you could repeat the question.
I think it had to do just where the money was going to come from. Was this going to be coming from the new batch of money or the old batch of money, the old CARES money?
As long as it's an allowable cost under the CARES Act, I think our desire is to allocate that funding first, since it has a shorter detention time. So, my intent is that it'd be a CARES Act expense initially.
Well, that makes sense. Any other questions for Mr. Boyce on agenda item number 28? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 29, which calls for the approval to purchase a solar-powered network camera and support equipment in the amount of $54,589.19. And this, again, is related to the mass vaccination site, which we hope to have up and running as soon as they give us some vaccine. Mr. Boyce, we'll look to you again. I don't know if you had any more to add on this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, but the only one what I would add to this is the next two manufacturers are from Wanco, W-A-N-C-O. Wanco is probably one of the best manufacturers of this. It's consistent with equipment we borrow from the Commonwealth and purchase through Homeland Security, same model. So Wanco's a terrific brand. What we're looking for here is, and we borrowed it several times over the last course of the year, is a solar-powered or capable camera system. The benefit of this, again, when we do our large sites, it's really going to be safety and security, trying to get a view of what's going on operationally. So this model will allow us to put a standalone camera. I think some of you may be familiar, we often borrow these from the Commonwealth for special events, but it'll provide an element to our vaccination sites. They can be remotely monitored when closed, and they can be observed when we are operational. Just a note, with all of our Homeland Security equipment, we do not record people. We do not use that for observation. We only use it for safety. So this is not surveillance equipment in the sense that we would be watching people. We live stream our safety and security back to the command post.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Boyce on agenda item number 29? All right, moving on to agenda item number 30. This calls for the approval to purchase 4 Rhino diesel generators with LED light tower and a generator at a cost of $135,600. And again, this has to do with the COVID task force mass vaccination site. Mr. Boyce.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, again, just on these particular items, these are light towers that operate 24 hours a day. With these, there are another way of doing this, and my staff did price this out. You can buy the generator, and then you can buy the light tower. It's 2 separate items. When you start getting there, you're up above $40,000. The other benefit is these are LED. The ones we currently have, we only have one left now in service, is the big old one just on construction sites. And the LED is a lot more efficient, and this will be plugged in right next to a vaccination site or building, supply the building with power, and then supply scene lighting afterwards.
Yeah,
Thank you. And go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Ruther.
No, I apologize for not raising this question earlier, but I just want to be clear. This assumes it's a mass vaccination site. I believe what we've been hearing to date from our vaccine team is that these would be for allocations of Johnson & Johnson single shot vaccine rather than multi-shot, although I'm assuming we could set up the necessary registration and stuff to be able to do the multi-shot if we had to. I guess I think this also depends on having sufficient supplies of vaccine available to be able to run this site. And I just wanted to make sure, I mean, I think we need to be ready to do this, but I would think that based on the amounts of vaccine we're getting this week, it wouldn't necessitate this site. I mean, maybe Dr. Taylor can comment on that, but I think this is, we're sort of looking forward and taking everybody at their word that there's going to be the vaccine available to support, to use at the site, correct? Because this, I mean, it's a fair amount of money. I think we need to be ready for it. I'm just asking, that's the process under which we're proceeding, correct?
It is, council member. You know, we're in a bit of a chicken and an egg position because once we start getting vaccine, the state is going to hold their feet to the fire to administering it. And we need to be prepared. As you said, we have to have comfort that they will supply the vaccine that they've said they will get to us. You know, we heard on the regional commissioner's call yesterday that there are places in the state where people have rented out big box stores to try and set up. I think we have to be prepared. We've already bought the C-box containers as an example as well, that some of which we're able to use during the testing, but I think it'd be irresponsible of us not to bring these forward and be prepared to provide a mass vaccination site.
I just think it's important that what we say to people is we are doing this because we are taking the State Department of Health at their word that there will be vaccine to deploy through this site. But we are doing this not entirely on spec, but we are doing the fact that we are setting this up to make this site available doesn't mean that we know we've got the vaccine to fill it. Because I think a lot of people are, you know, if they see, oh my gosh, we spent all this money to set up yet another vaccine site, they're going to be like, well, why aren't there appointments at Delaware County Community College? And I think what we need to just be able to make clear to people is we have, as we have done all along, we are doing our very best to be ready to be able to deploy whatever they can give us. But this does not mean that we have the vaccine in hand at this time.
Ms. Ruther, if I could, I couldn't agree more that we need to be ready. And it's not an expectation of promise, but in advocating for all of this equipment in its portable nature, we support the election bureaus. I'm very happy. I see Mr. Barone's on here before me. We'll be out with light towers and equipment like this, supporting a host of missions that we go forward. And I know council's been supportive of so many things over the year, but when we try and direct wire these things into the community college, we have a very high expense, probably $30,000 wire these in, and then we lose our flexibility. So two things are true. One, you know, we are hoping to get the vaccine, but two, this equipment can be used at disasters or other times. So it's not a one-off.
No, and I think that's great. And it's certainly even the period of time that we've discussed over which we would have to deploy these vaccines at this site, you know, it's sufficiently long that it doesn't make sense to rent. You know, we should in fact buy the equipment. So I'm not opposed to it. I just really wanted to be clear because I didn't want anybody who just kind of tuned in and saw part of this meeting to think that we have a guarantee of getting the vaccine. We're going to be ready because we've been told to be ready, and that's what we're doing. But I just want people to understand this is preparation, and we will make appointments as soon as we've got the vaccine.
Thank you. Anything further from Mr. Boyce on agenda item number 30? All right, thank you, Mr. Boyce. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you, sir.
Agenda item number 31 calls for an approval of a motion to waive the annual assessment appeals fees for 2020 county real estate assessment appeals. And I think we are looking at Mr. Martin to present this.
Right. And first, in the way of a correction, while you read the agenda accurately, Mr. Chairman, this relates to 2022 county real estate assessment appeals. This is a request coming from the Board of Assessment Appeals, and it's coming to you at this point because they are in the process of beginning to print paperwork and posting online instructions to taxpayers associated with taxpayers' potential appeals of their 2022 real estate tax assessments. Because this real estate appeal cycle will be the first cycle following taxpayers' receipt of their county tax bills, as they may have been adjusted as following the countywide reassessment. The Board of Assessment Appeals is recommending to council that it waive assessment appeal fees for the 2022 cycle in order to accommodate county residents, owners of county real estate, since there may be the potential for another significant year of real estate appeals. There are limited ways within the authority of county council to provide accommodations to taxpayers who may be struggling with changes in their real estate taxes. One thing that this council can do is to waive these fees, and that is the request. You're on mute, Ms. Ruther.
I did have the opportunity to speak to both the chair of the Board of Assessment Appeals and to the solicitor for the Board of Assessments, who's been through this process previously. And we did not see an excessive number of real estate appeals last year from the reassessment. It is our assessment board solicitors' experience that you typically see not the same number, but not an insignificantly smaller number in that first year of annual valuation appeals after the reassessment appeal. And I think one of the things that we may encounter is that there would be both school districts and individuals who will be appealing, because there is always the possibility that while we believe that we have no reason not to believe at this point that the reassessment work done by Tyler didn't meet the contractual standards. They provided a statistical analysis showing they did, a report showing they did, and that report is being reviewed by the county. It didn't have to come before council because the cost was not sufficient to make it come before council. But there is an expert who is doing a review of Tyler's work. Even though they may have satisfied the standards in the contract on a countywide basis, it is possible that with a algorithmic valuation methodology like Delaware County contracted for with Tyler in 2017, that there could be errors around the county, pockets, shall we say, where a neighborhood or for real estate market purposes might have been misconstrued. So in other words, like if you have a brand new subdivision right next to some older houses, some of the older houses for valuation purposes may be lumped in with the newer subdivision for valuation purposes when looking at market comps rather than the other older houses. I mean, it's just the sort of thing that can happen when you're doing as many parcels as happened, and it wouldn't be enough to statistically upset the results overall, but it could create problems here and there. And one of the ways you address that kind of a problem is through real estate it's through real estate assessment appeals. So if the goal is to encourage school districts and homeowners to try and fix some of these problems through real estate assessment appeals, because we cannot go back and on a spot assessment basis necessarily do that, then I think we want people, especially this year, to be mindful of those kinds of issues and to appeal. And we want school districts to appeal, to correct both properties that are too low and properties that are too high. And I think one way we can facilitate that and make it happen and make sure that people have confidence in the reassessment is to waive the fees this year to allow that process to move forward. So after speaking to them, I very much support this. I think it is not, I know Mr. Lazarus can speak to this, but he said, well, it always helps if they have some skin in the game and they paid their $25 or their $50 to appeal. I think that's true, but we did not get overwhelmed with appeals last year. I don't think we will get overwhelmed with appeals this year. I do think this is a fair thing to do as we try to true up the reassessment in those places where even if it meets the county-wide standard, those pockets where we have some adjustments to make.
So do we have an idea? Do we have an idea of what the order of magnitude of the income that will be foregoing by doing this is?
It would be based upon an estimate of how many appeals there would be. I think you're in the range of $25,000 to $50,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the scheme of things, given the amount of money that we've had to spend on the reassessment and everything else, doing what we can do to allow people to get it right, that is a relatively small amount of money.
All right, anything further in the interest of moving along here as the hour is drawing late? All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. Agenda item number 32 calls for the approval to appoint the following individuals to the Children and Youth Services Advisory Committee. Samantha L. Newell to a term ending October 2021 and Kiana Anderson to a term ending October 2022. Anybody wish to comment on these agenda items? All right, hearing none. Agenda item number 33 calls for an approval to appoint Gwen Meltzer to the Delaware County Housing Authority to a term ending January 2026. Any questions or comments from?
I'm sorry. The only comment I would make is that, we did receive a number of really impressive resumes for this position, but this position has to go to somebody who it's what's called the tenant seat on the board. So it had to go to somebody who was actually a tenant of the Delaware County Housing Authority or receiving services like a form of a voucher or something from the Delaware County Housing Authority. I think Ms. Meltzer is a great candidate, but she didn't meet that criteria. Many of the applicants did not.
All right, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 34, it calls for the approval to appoint the following individuals to the Economic Development Oversight Board. Jamal Johnson to a term ending March 31st, 2024. Anthony Lucy to a term ending March 31st, 2024. And Elaine P. Schaefer to a term ending March 31, 2021 as the council representative. Any questions or comments on this agenda item? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 35, which calls for the approval to appoint the following individuals to the SEPTA Citizens Advisory Board. Alfred Ackert, I apologize if I've mispronounced your last name, to a term ending February 2023, and Damian Christopher Warsavich to a term ending February 2023. Any comments from council?
The only comment that I have is, Ms. Coogan, you are continuing to leave this up on the website, are you not? Because we actually have a third appointment of a regular SEPTA rider that we can make to the SEPTA Citizens Advisory Board. It is not a paid position, but anybody who serves in that capacity does get a free transit pass to ride SEPTA.
That's correct. It's still on our website.
All right, thank you. Agenda item number 36 calls for a request by the Controller's Office for the payment of current bills. Ms. Phillips, do you have any comments about this? Okay, just that we do so. Any questions or comments from council? All right, agenda item number 37 will call for communications from the Executive Director.
Mr. Chair, just two things I'll forward. One is a summary of costs to date for the Yaden Wellness Center, to give you an overview of what that has cost us. And then secondly, I hope to work with Ms. Hall to give you a summary of our transition plans and our vaccination plans in one place so that you have that information to speak to your constituents and our community members.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lazarus. Any questions or comments from council? All right, next agenda item will call for the solicitor's report. Anything, Mr. Martin?
Tomorrow night, I'll be seeking the approval to file 2 petitions for the termination of parental rights and consent, to file 1 consent for adoption with the Ordinance Court. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions for Mr. Martin? All right, moving on to the next agenda item. This will call for public comment. Ms. Ruther, are you aware of any public comments that we've received?
Yes, we do have some public comments. From Susan Edwards, 32 College Avenue, Swarthmore, PA. To whom it may concern, I support the efforts of Chester residents concerned for quality living to stop sending Delaware County's trash to the Covanta plant in Chester to be incinerated. The high childhood asthma rates and other health impacts such as cancer and heart disease in Chester, as well as the cumulative impacts of other industries and highway exhaust, make it a bad location for disposing of the waste of those of us who don't live in Chester. I see it as an environmental justice or injustice issue. I would like Delaware County Council and Delaware County Solid Waste Authority to explore alternatives, including zero waste and landfilling instead. I can say we met with representatives, I shouldn't say we, the Solid Waste Authority Board had representatives of that group at its public meeting last week. One of the things that the Solid Waste Authority Board was in unanimous agreement about was having a public meeting, hopefully sometime in April, to because it's the board's under new leadership. There's a lot of different things going on there. And so some preparation time is needed, but to discuss exactly the things that Ms. Edwards bringing up. I don't know if anybody else has any other comment on that. From Olivia Thorne, she does not give an address, but she is writing on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Delaware County and does give their mailing address, which is a post office box bill. I happen to know where she lives. Should we read this or should I ask her to resubmit it with an address for tomorrow night?
Please read it.
So it's from Olivia Thorne, President, League of Women Voters of Delaware County, regarding the renewal of the Covanta contract. The League of Women Voters of Delaware County appreciates the opportunity to address concerns about the upcoming contract for Covanta's trash incinerator. Based on our national position developed after extensive study and consensus, we believe that natural resources should be managed as interrelated parts of life-supporting ecosystems. Resources should be conserved and protected to assure their future availability. Pollution of these resources should be controlled in order to preserve the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of ecosystems and to protect the public health. We embrace these communities that have adopted the zero waste resolution, as it is not consistent with our natural resources position, as it is not only consistent with our natural resources position, but also with the League's stance on climate change. While we advocate to more fully implement these positions, it is important that Delaware County Council consider the following questions as you make decisions regarding the future of the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority. Are well-documented public health costs worth the benefit? Well, the hazards associated with air pollution are sadly most prevalent in the environmental justice areas in close proximity to the site. Their cumulative, long-lasting, and life-altering consequences are experienced by many throughout the region. What can be done to mitigate and monitor more fully the pollutants discharged by this mega trash incinerator? For example, the quality and quantity of plastics burned has evolved over recent decades. What can be done to address the changing nature of what is going into and out of this facility? Given the alternative of available landfills, what can be done to phase out the use of this waste site, given the increasing prevalence of flooding and predicted rise of water along the Delaware River? The long-term safety, security, and actual visibility of this are questionable. As county council members, you are charged with many challenges. We trust that you will continue to use common sense as you reflect on the common good of your constituents, recognizing the need to rebalance inequities of the past as we face the future together with a renewed commitment to public health. Thank you. Again, I would just like to point out that Delaware County does not have a contract with Covanta. It is the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority. These are all excellent points. And, again, the Solid Waste Authority has committed to a public meeting and has discussed doing a needs assessment to look at many of these questions. But I would also state that the Covanta facility is permitted by the State Department of Environmental Protection, and it has long-term contracts with the City of Philadelphia and the City of New York. And so even if Delaware County Solid Waste Authority no longer sends its trash there, I don't know that the Solid Waste Authority or even Delaware County currently has the ability to do anything about it. I think those are things that we would need to refer to our solicitor. And finally,
I'd just like to comment on that too, though. It would be a good start, though. We don't have the unilateral ability to. The Solid Waste Authority couldn't shut it down, but it could certainly cease to support it. So I don't think that the fact that others use it should necessarily excuse the Solid Waste Authority from taking action.
No, but I think it's a very complicated issue. I hope all of council will attend that public meeting where those of us, especially myself as a new member of the Solid Waste Authority Board, I'm going to try and get educated about all the moving parts. So I hope everybody here will be able to tune in or watch it.
And when is that?
It's going to be at the end of April, or maybe early May. By the way, the Covanta contract can't even come before the Solid Waste Authority Board until Covanta gives notice, which my understanding is they can't do that until May. So the earliest it could come before the Solid Waste Authority Board for consideration is in May. So the last item is from Michelle Patale, MD, Managing Director of Counterpoint SRE. Again, Mr. Martin, it does not have an address. Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. 77 West Putnam Avenue, Greenwich, Connecticut. Asking that we submit this. It's in connection with the PACE program. Dear council members, the state of Pennsylvania has recognized the need to provide low-cost financing to owners of commercial and industrial properties for energy and water efficiency projects. PACE provides this financing with private capital that will support municipal economic development, the construction industry, as well as supporting the county's sustainable planning initiatives. I ask for your support to offer Delaware County commercial property owners a means to finance eligible projects through PACE, including capital-intensive projects that will incentivize investments in Delaware County and help meet the county's energy and carbon emission goals. In addition to supporting construction industry and county sustainability goals, PACE financing may be used by owners to help rebound from the effects of COVID-19. Many commercial owners are evaluating air quality in their buildings and may seek low-cost capital to upgrade ventilation, to install disinfecting technologies, and to make other changes to their buildings to better protect the occupants. Healthcare facilities have risen to the demand of the pandemic, and PACE may help these facilities make upgrades without using capital that is needed elsewhere to provide services. PACE financing may provide readily available low-cost capital to improve safety and mitigate the risks from COVID-19. PACE incentives the reduction of energy consumption and authorizes financings to be repaid through a municipal charge placed on the improved property, like other public benefits. CPACE financing fills the void for clean energy financing for projects such as deep energy improvements in buildings and renewable energy projects. I ask for your support of HB 5228, which would allow energy efficiency, renewable generation, and water conservation improvements to be financed through CPACE to allow private capital investment that will improve infrastructure and protect lives. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Ruther. The next item, although I can't find my agenda, but I'm going to assume that the next item calls for council comments. So anything from council? All right. Well, I have found my agenda. I was right. I guess that if there's nothing further from council, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All right. Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow night, or see you tonight.